Hello everyone. Welcome to the seminar series organized by the RMIT University Center for Cybersecurity Research and Innovation. Today we have with us Dr. Khoa Nguyen. Before introducing the speaker, we just have a few housekeeping rules. So now during your talk, please mute your microphone and turn off your video. And it is an interactive talk, so you can post questions in the chat or raise your hand and ask questions at any time. Okay, so before starting, let me do the acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the people of the Waigurang and Wungurang language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation, on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of RMIT University, and the lands that I'm speaking from today. As we gather virtually across many different parts of the world, we also encourage you to acknowledge the lands in which you are joining us from. And we respectfully acknowledge the First Nation people of the 5 Kulin nations, their ancestors and elders, past, present, and emerging. My name is Hoang, and I am one of the seminar coordinator for the center. At the center, we carry out quality multidisciplinary research relating to different aspects of cybersecurity, such as organizational, human, and technology aspects. And we actively engage industry and government within Australia and globally, contributing to the cybersecurity innovation ecosystem within Australia and globally. So today, I'm very happy to have with us Dr. Khoa Nguyen from University of Wollongong. He's going to present his talk on the topic of privacy and accountability in multi-user authentication systems. Dr. Khoa Nguyen is currently a senior lecturer at the School of Technology and Information, School of Computing and Information Technology at the University of Wollongong, and he received his PhD in cryptography in 2014 from Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. His main research interests includes designs and analysis of privacy-preserving and quantum-safe cryptographic protocols. He has published more than 40 papers, most of which are at very high-ranked conferences and journals in cryptography and security, such as Crypto, Eurocrypt, AsiaCrypt, PKC, Euro S&P SRX, ACNS, and different IT transactions. He served as a program co-chair of ProfSec 2020, which is the 14th International Conference on Provable and Practical Security, and of ACISP 2022, the 27th Australasian Conference on Information Security and Privacy. And he also served as a program committee member of about 30 other conferences, including AsiaCrypt from 4 years from 2017 to 2021. So let us welcome Dr. Khoa Nguyen. So I will just stop my screen sharing, and Khoa, please share your screen as well. Okay, so I can see your screen now, Hoang.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Hoang, for the nice introduction. And thank you again for inviting me to talk in this seminar. And hello and good day to everyone. It is my great pleasure to be here today. And I'm going to talk about several new ideas for addressing the tension between privacy and accountability in multi-user authentication systems. This talk is based on 2 joint works with many of my colleagues. A paper with Benoit Libert at Ines Lyon, France, with Thomas Bitter at UC Leuven, Belgium, with Moti Jung at Google in the US, which were published at the conference Eurocrypt last year. And another paper was with my colleague at the University of Wollongong, Phu Chung Kuo, Willy Shu Shlo, and Ko Min Yang, which was published at the conference Crypto this year. So here is the plan of my talk. First, I will discuss the interrelationship between privacy and accountability in multi-user cryptographic systems. I will go through several prominent examples of previous multi-user authentication system with privacy and accountability features, and I will provide some observations regarding their shortcomings. Then I will demonstrate how these shortcomings can be addressed step by step via the introduction of two new cryptographic primitives, namely bifurcated anonymous signatures and multimodal private signatures. I will also briefly discuss how to construct this new system based on existing cryptographic primitives in a modular manner. Finally, I will list several open questions that I think could be interesting topics for further investigations. In the process, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to interrupt me. So privacy is a prime concern in our digital life nowadays. With the rise of the Internet of Things and big data, the problem of preserving users' privacy is becoming increasingly important. There exist various approaches to protect privacy of users. In this talk, we are only interested in the cryptographic approach, namely protecting users' privacy using cryptographic techniques as the major tools. It is worth noting that privacy-preserving crypto systems, which are advanced cryptographic algorithms guaranteeing both security and privacy, have been proposed since the early 1980s. This essential research area gets a lot of traction, not only because of growing practical demands, but also due to its great theoretical interest. One crucial aspect of privacy in the multi-user setting is anonymity. When communicating sensitive information over computer networks, privacy-aware users may want to keep their identities perfectly hidden. Anonymity is also widely regarded as a basic for promoting freedom of speech and expression. However, absolute anonymity can be abused for illegal or unethical purposes, such as cyberbullying, spreading of misinformation, money laundering, and blackmailing. Hence, from the system authorities' perspective, it is highly desirable to ensure users' accountability, namely on users who abuse anonymity to carry out problematic activities should be kept accountable. As a consequence, there is an uneasy privacy versus accountability tension, which correspond to the somewhat conflicting incentives of users and authorities. Privacy-aware users would want to protect their anonymity as much as possible. Meanwhile, authority would want to ensure that unproblematic users are caught. Towards addressing this tension, numerous privacy-preserving cryptographic primitives have been proposed in the last several decades. In the following, I will briefly review several notable examples in the context of multi-user authentication and discuss why they have not offered a satisfying solution. Let us first consider the setting of ring signatures. This is one of the most well-known private signature systems, and this cryptographic primitive was introduced by Rivest, Shamir, and Thoman at the conference AsiaCrypt 2001. So you know that Rivest and Shamir, the R and S here, are the same inventors of the famous RSA crypto system, and they are Turing Award winners. So in a ring signature, we have a group of users, and each user has a secret signing key, which can be used to sign messages in an anonymous manner. Here, the signer with the personal identifiable information ID can issue a signature on any message in a way such that the signature verifiers can be convinced that the signatures was from someone in the group, but cannot determine who is the actual signer. Hence, ring signatures provide absolute privacy for signers. Absolute anonymity could be a nice feature that protects the user in certain situations, such as whistleblowing. This is actually the primary motivation for ring signatures as discussed in the IST paper. In fact, their paper has titled How to Leak a Secret. However, absolute anonymity can also be abused for unethical or illegal purposes. The original notion of ring signature indeed provides no user accountability. And from the perspective of authorities, so they tend not like it, this setting. Therefore, it would be desirable to restrict the assess the anonymity of users in ring signatures. In fact, there have been several attempts, such as linkable ring signatures or traceable ring signatures. In a linkable ring signatures, if a user ever issues two signatures, then they can be publicly linked. Okay, so this primitive of linkable ring signature, in fact, is quite interesting, and recently it has been applied to the context of privacy-preserving cryptocurrencies, where if you are an owner of a wallet, you cannot spend a coin twice. So that is related to the problem of double spending prevention in cryptocurrencies, where whenever you issue two signatures, then so would mean that you spend the coin twice, then the two transactions will be linked and people can detect this double spending. Another primitive here is traceable ring signature. So it has the properties of linkable ring signatures, but additionally, it also provides a traceability feature, which means that if a signer of two signatures on two messages that satisfy certain conditions, then the signer, the identity of the signer can be traced using some public algorithm. There's others similar cryptographic primitives that also aim to provide restricted to restrict the excessive anonymity of users in authentication systems. We can name a few of them, like eCash or a K-time anonymous authentication system, where for the latter is basically a generalization of linkable ring signatures, where the user will lose its anonymity after a K signatures. However, the linking or tracing mechanisms in all of these systems can only be activated if the signer in question has generated at least two signatures, right? Which means that if a malicious signer only issued one controversial signature and then went offline forever, then that malicious signer can avoid accountability. So it's not satisfactory in this sense. So if we look for a primitive offering both anonymity and accountability, then the most well-known example is group signatures. Next, we will discuss group signature. Okay, group signature. So basically, it has the anonymous signing features of ring signature. Namely, we also have a group of signer and each signer can anonymously sign messages on behalf of the whole group. But here we additionally have a tracing feature. Specifically, we have an opening authority or OA who has a secret key that can be used to trace any valid signature and recover the identity of the signer. In fact, group signatures can have many appealing applications. For example, we can implement group signatures to realize privacy-preserving access to buildings with accountability. For example, on register, users can enter a government building in an anonymous manner. However, in case of some incident, if some incident occur at a particular time, then the administrator can identify the identities of the user of the guest who entered the building during that particular time period. So group signature may potentially find other practical applications where both privacy and accountability are desirable in a similar manner as in my example. Moreover, group signature also have great theoretical interest. In fact, the design of the secure group signature system typically requires sophisticated combination of different cryptographic building blocks, such as public key encryption, ordinary digital signatures, and zero-knowledge proof system. And due to these features, group signature so far have been viewed as the primary case study for advanced multi-user authentication systems. Okay, so here let me discuss some of the shortcomings of the privacy and versus accountability features in group signatures. We can see that in group signature, the opening authority is supposed to take action only in case of disputes. That's how that's the our purpose when we introduce this opening authority. However, if this authority is corrupted, then it can open all signatures at will, and in such a case, there is essentially no privacy for users. Okay, so to address this issue, there have been several attempts to restrict the power of the opening authority in group signatures, such as traceable signatures, group signature with message-dependent opening, or accountable tracing signatures. In traceable signatures, so we additionally have so instead of having an all-powerful opening authority, we implement a user-based tracing. So there is here we have the OA, but for every user, the OA can issue a trapdoor that can be used to open only signatures generated by that given user. Group signature with message-dependent opening, in fact, it works in a similar way, but for messages. Namely, here the trapdoor are specifically generated for a given message, but not of a given user. So using a trapdoor for a message M, then one can open all the signatures on that particular message M. With respect to accountable tracing signatures, then it has some interesting features where at the time of enrolling a user to a group at the time of registration, the group managers will have an option to choose whether that user will be traceable or not. So if the group manager decide that a particular user will be traceable, then it works like in ordinary group signature. And if otherwise the manager decide that this user is not traceable, then so basically the privacy of that user will be totally protected, like in ring signature. However, the choice of whether the user is traceable or not have to be made in advance, and it cannot be changed later. Okay, so despite of the attempt, we can still observe that the anonymity in this modified group signature system can still be broken without user's consent. Why? Because in traceable signatures and group signature with message dependent openings, we still have an on-powerful OA, and that OA, that opening authority, can still open any signature at will without any agreement of the users. And how about countable tracing signatures? So even though the managers have an option to decide whether a given user will be traced or not, however, if the manager is malicious, then he can decide that on the user must be traceable, and in that case, so the users cannot basically have no privacy against such a malicious manager. Okay, so to summarize, on the one hand, we have ring signatures and variants that give too much privilege for users. On the other hand, we have group signatures and variants that provide too much power for the authorities. Finding a solution that is reasonably fair for both users and authorities, a solution that somehow balances privacy and accountabilities, in this was a challenging problem for a long time. So to tackle that problem, so let us think about the following arrangement. In this arrangement, is it wishful arrangement? We want authority to be able to trace only signatures satisfying some given condition. And we also want that the user should know in advance which signatures are traceable. Okay, so while we think about this such kind of arrangement, so let's consider some example. First, in the context of privacy-preserving currencies, suppose that we set the rules such that on the transactions which associated with an amount of money more than $10,000 should be traceable. Okay, so then in that case, if we set the rules, then the authority in fact can trace on the transaction with large amount of money, right? That is it, $10,000. And users also know whether a given transaction will be traced or not. Okay, so if they just send some amount of money less than $10,000, then they can be worry-free about whether their privacy will be broken or not. And if we set such a rule, then authority can only trace the transaction with large amount, and for the small amount transactions, then basically the privacy of user will be fully protected. Similarly, we can think about other situations like privacy-preserving declarations, where when user want to do some activity online or offline, they have to fill in some kind of declaration, right? So for example, they have to declare whether they are already fully COVID-19 vaccinated, or they have to declare whether they are above 18 years old or not. And in this case, we can set the rules such that if users say already fully vaccinated, then the activities of that given user will not be traceable. And similarly, if user is less than 18 years old, then some activities must be traceable. So that is a nice setting that we want to achieve. Okay, so one additional property that we also aim to achieve, that is traceability must be oblivious to the public. Why? For example, from the public point of view, if they know a given transaction is traceable or not, then in fact it's a kind of compromising of privacy, because the public will know that, okay, this transaction in fact is involved an amount less than 10,000 or more than 10,000. Okay, so it's some kind of violation of privacy, right? Similarly, if the public knows that this activity of the user is traceable, then they will know that a given user is fully vaccinated or not, or more than 18 years old or not. So that also can be viewed as some kind of privacy violation. So we would want that the traceability of a given signatures or given activities will be only known by the user and the opening authority, but must be oblivious to the public. Okay, so that is our wishful thinking, and to this end, we together with college, so we propose a new primitive that we call bifurcated anonymous signatures, or BIS for short, and that was presented at the conference Eurocrypt last year. And this primitive can be seen as a hybrid of ring signatures and group signatures. In which sense? More precisely, a given BIS could be traceable or non-traceable depending on a predicate bit P computed by the signer before signing. So here a predicate P is viewed as a kind of Boolean function that output one bit, and it takes as input three values: the message to be signed, the identity of the signer, and some auxiliary information that we call a witness, and we denote by W here. And the output will be 0 or 1. Okay, so what's the purpose of introduce this predicate? In fact, if P is 0, then the signature is non-traceable, and the authority can learn nothing about ID, about the identity of the signer. It's essentially as in ring signatures. If P is 1, then the signature is traceable, and the authority can recover the identity of the signer as in group signatures. Okay, so what is notable here is that the user knows the value of P in advance, and it can control its privacy and accountability. In the traceable case, which means that when P equal to 1, then the user can decide whether to sign a given message or not. If they cannot afford to be traced, then they can just avoid the signing. Okay. In the non-traceable case, then the signer can just issue the transaction and just sign the message without worrying about being traced. Okay, so from the authority's point of view, we can see that authority can also ensure that signers of all traceable signatures will be kept accountable. So that is basically that can address the incentive of authority. In other words, in a bias system, whether the signer of a given signature can have absolute anonymity or can be traced, is made context dependent and is known to the signer at the time of signature generation. As a result, tracing can only be done with user's consent on the one hand, and no traceable signature can escape being traced on the other hand. This primitive seems to provide a reasonably fair setting for both authorities and users, and seem to have offered a satisfying resolution for the tension between privacy and accountability that we have discussed. However, there are still problems. I will discuss next. In fact, there is a crucial disadvantage of bifurcated anonymous signatures, also of group signatures, and all similar proposals. Our observation is that accountability in these systems is realized via a total tracing procedure. During such a procedure, the whole identity of the traced users must be disclosed to the authorities. The whole personally identifiable information of the users will be disclosed. This level of accountability is indeed a serious violation of users' privacy. In fact, while privacy is a very complicated notion, in its purest sense, it can be defined as the right of an individual to control which piece of information about herself or himself can be disclosed. Furthermore, in many real-life situations, it is not necessarily the highest priority for authorities to perform a total tracing. Authorities in many cases may be interested in only some statistics about the users. For instance, authorities could only be interested in learning whether an anonymous user is over 18 years old or not, or work in a given organization or not, or lives in a particular area, or has an annual income exceeding certain threshold, or has been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, etc. So this observation motivated us to consider systems in which users and authorities have certain agreement on which piece of information can possibly be disclosed for each signature. Okay, so motivated by this, we together with co-authors, we introduced a new primitive at the conference crypto this year, which we call multi-model private signatures, or MPS for short. Our proposal can be summarized as follows. When setting up a system, we specify a list of signing functions and a list of, say, K disclosing function, denoted by G1, G2, and so on and so forth to GK, where K is certain positive integers. If user ID, which identity ID, wants to sign message M with respect to a signing function F, then it first computes a function F that takes input M, the message M, the identity ID, and some auxiliary information that we can witness and denoted by W, similar to the bias case. Here, the witness can be viewed as an evidence for the signability of the tuple M, W, and ID, and the value of F in this case is not a bit, but is an integer between 0 and k. If the value of the function f is 0, then message f cannot be signed and the user cannot do anything but just abort the procedure. Otherwise, when f is non-zero, which means that it is between 1 and k, right? Then the user can generate a valid signatures that is anonymous to everyone but the opening authority. So what the opening authority can learn then, if f is equal to 1, then it can learn the function g1 of ID and nothing else. If f is 2, then it can learn the function g2 of ID and nothing else. Similarly, for every j between 1 and k, it can learn the function gj of ID and nothing else. In other words, the value of f determines which disclosing function will be activated. Okay, so looking back, our proposal of MPS in fact does capture ring signatures, group signatures, and also bias as special cases. How? Ring and group signatures in fact correspond to the case of a single disclosing function. We have one disclosing function. For ring signatures, that disclosing function is simply the 0 function, where you have a absolute privacy for user and the disclosing function just return a 0 value. For group signatures, that disclosing function is simply the identity function, where when the tracing procedure is activated, so you can recover the identity of the user, right? So that is the one single disclosing function, and that is just the identity function. Meanwhile, for bias, would correspond to the case where we have a two disclosing functions. What are they? They are the 0 and the identity functions. Okay, here we significantly generalize the situation where we have not just one or two disclosing function, but we can have any k function for any polynomially large value of k. Okay, so let us consider an example where we have a 4 disclosing function. So in this scenario, so we have some anonymous financial transaction, and it has a hidden amount of money, a situation that we can see in some privacy-preserving cryptocurrency system like Monero. We can introduce some additional features to this anonymous financial transaction system. For instance, the authority can regulate the system as follows. When an amount is less than $100, then the transaction will be anonymous to everyone, including the authority. So, in other words, all transactions involving an amount less than 100 will be totally anonymous. However, when the amount is between 100 and 1,000, then authority will be able to learn the country of the sender. And if an amount is between 1,000 and 10,000, then the authority can identify not just the country, but also the company, the organization of the sender. And finally, for an amount at least 10,000, then the full identity of the sender will be traced, can be learned by the authority. In other words, we can have a fine-grained accountability. Depending on the underlying transaction amounts, the authority can learn different pieces of information about the sender. Okay, so that's how we can possibly use the idea of multi-model private signatures in practice. Okay, so now let me summarize some noteworthy properties of MPS. The underlying concept in this represents a totally new approach for addressing the tension between privacy and accountability in multi-user signature system. And signatures in MPS are anonymous to everyone except the opening authority, who can learn some special information of the user identity. And that piece of information, which we denote by OP here, can be defined in a flexible and fine-grained manner based on a set of disclosing functions. Privacy in MPS can naturally be achieved because signer can decide which piece of personal information can be disclosed. That is, I think, is the privacy, how privacy is viewed in its very pure sense. Accountability is also achieved since the authority can learn the desirable information if needed. Okay, so when introducing a new cryptographic primitives, then we have to come up with a very rigorous definition of the syntax and of the security. This step for MPS is in fact quite exciting and is not straightforward at all. And we would like to make our definition as general as possible by capturing not only the privacy and accountability features of ring, group, and biased signatures, but we also want to capture the fine-grained controls on who can sign which message, as in some of the previous signature system. That's why we have a setting where the signing function output 0, then the signer, we don't allow the signer to sign in such a case. And it's also worth highlighting that the privacy definition of MPS is quite involved, since we have to address the case where the opening authority is fully corrupted. This level of privacy, in fact, is impossible to achieve in ordinary group signatures, but here we allow such a malicious and fully corrupted opening authority. We also provide a generic and modular construction of MPS for arbitrary functions, and it's based on commonly used cryptographic building blocks. Our construction can be instantiated in the from many of the computational assumptions, including from pairings and also from lattice assumption. So here for the pairing, so we can instantiate in the standard model, so which means that it's just in the model where we do not make any assumption on idealistic functions like a hash function, and in contrast, a ROM here stands for the random oracle model, where we have to make an assumption that they exist idealistic hash functions. Okay, so so let me just briefly mention our modular design for MPS. So our construction relies on very commonly used cryptographic building blocks, namely ordinary digital signatures, public key encryption, and non-interactive zero-day proof for general statements. And this, as a feasibility results, and the construction can be realized from pairings and also from lattice in the standard models. And our construction just follows the a paradigm that is known as the sign that encrypts and prove paradigm, which is typically used for previously for designing group signatures. In this process, then the group manager just certify the membership by a user by signing the user's identity, and when issuing a signature, the user encrypts something and prove well-formedness of ciphertext, as well as the knowledge of a valid membership certificate. And we can note that in group signatures, then the user typically encrypts its full identity ID, while in bias, the ciphertext just contain either identity of the user, or just a message 0 that contain no information about ID. And here the main for MPS, the main difference is that the subtext content exactly what needs to be disclosed. So in fact, we encrypt exactly the function j of ID, where j is the output of the signing function f. Okay, and that exactly what needs to be disclosed with the OP value here. And proving the well-founded of such a ciphertext in zero knowledge is in fact the most involved step of the constructions. And okay, so for our lattice-based and variant-based instantiations, then we consider the setting with just one signing function and four disclosing function, and we let the message M be commitment to some widget W and define the function F based on integer range. And this is just to capture our motivating example about anonymous financial transaction with hidden amounts. And we also consider disclosing function as linear transformation of identity ID, which are sufficient for many applications. And our parent-based and lattice-based construction just follow the same paradigm as the generic construction, but we employ some of the dedicated building block for efficiency reasons. So they are quite technical, and I will skip these concrete setting of parent-based and lattice-based here. So now let me just conclude the talk by raising some of the open questions. So as the first work on this multimodal private signature, so we do not expect to provide a thorough study of this primitive. So we leave several open questions that we think will be interesting for future investigations. So the first question is to construct practically usable MPS schemes with expressive signing and disclosing functions. Also designing efficient MPS scheme with post-quantum security is also a fascinating question. Note that our proposed variant-based and lattice-based construction captures quite expressive functions, but are not really efficient. In particular, even though we have a construction from lattices, both for MPS and also for bias, however, the construction is quite impractical. And the question here is to make them more practical and can be useful for practice. Okay, so from the theoretical perspective, it also worth studying the connection between bias and MPS with other existing cryptographic primitives like fully homomorphic encryption and functional encryption. And another appealing question is to equip the bias and MPS with additional functionality like a verifiable opening or revocation of user, which we have not addressed in our works. And also that our work is just for we try to balance the goal is to balance the privacy and accountability feature in authentication system, but we haven't considered the same questions for other cryptographic system like encryption system. Then that should be a very interesting question to consider the problems to bring the same similar ideas to the setting of encryption. In fact, for some encryption system, the tension between privacy and accountability also long-standing open questions. Okay, so and let me conclude my presentation here, and thank you very much for your time and your attention, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thanks a lot, Khoa, for the excellent talk. So any question for the speaker? So while waiting for question coming from the audience, maybe I have a quick questions on the two schemes that you're actually using, two construction you're actually using based on lattice. The first one is based on lattice. The other one is based on pairing. So could you give us a quick comparison of the two?
Okay, so so for the in terms of efficiency, then the parent-based construction, because it's based on reasonably efficient cryptographic building blocks based on variants that have been previously proposed in the last decade. So the efficiency is better than the latest one. However, if we look at security against quantum adversaries, supposedly you have an adversary who have access to a very powerful quantum computers, then such a construction from parents will become insecure. So that's why we need to consider the setting of lattice-based assumptions where that construction may be insecure, may be secure against quantum computers. However, the efficiency is much worse than the variant-based one.
I see. So one next question is on, let's say you're talking about the efficiency of, so you have, so the parties you have means the authorities, the signer, and maybe someone else. So what would be the complexity of operations for them to perform? For example, is it something like a linear in the size of the message, or is it like a quadratic or something like that? Can you give us a hint on that?
Okay, so if we look at the size and encrypt and proof approach, so basically in our generic construction, the signature size is linear in the message size, linear in the witness size, also linear in the identity size. So, however, the hidden constant is very large, especially for the lattice one. If we implement some advanced primitive like fully homomorphic encryption, then we may achieve a feature that the signature is independent of the circuit size. By circuit, I mean the circuit used to represent the signing functions, because essentially in the process we have to prove that the output of the signing function is correct, right? So we have to go in the generic approach. So we have to represent that function as a circuit, and we prove that the circuit in fact output the right value, okay, the correct value. So if we don't use any advanced primitives, then the signature size will expectedly be linear in the size of the circuit. If we use other advanced primitives, especially fully homomorphic encryption, then we may achieve circuits signature size independent or just logarithmic in the circuit size. However, the hidden constant will be huge. Will be even much bigger than the one that we currently achieve due to the significant inefficiency of fully homomorphic encryption, for example.
Thanks, Khoa. So there are two questions. I think one, I'll come back to Professor Ibrahim a bit later. So let me read Abebe's question from the chat. Can we adopt this to device authentications like Internet of Things? If so, what about resource efficiency? Yeah, so whether we can use it for device authentications in Internet of Things and resource efficiency.
Okay, so this is interesting question. In fact, I already mentioned the efficiency of our current construction. So in fact, our work it is about introducing the new ideas, a new approach for balancing privacy and accountability. We propose a new primitive. Okay, which is primitive? You can solve this open question. How to realize it? In fact, it depends on the context. If you want to adopt into a lightweight device like Internet of Things, then you may try to relax the security a little bit. For example, in my setting, in the setting of bias or MPS, in fact, we have a centralized system, and we need to, every user need to register to to the system, right? So we have to in terms of cryptographic techniques. So we have to realize it using some some signature scheme with some special properties, and we have to run very complicated, the proof. Okay, so that is the source of inefficiencies. So if you want to use to IoT device, then it may be possible, but it's very likely that you have to relax the security property a little bit. Yes.
So maybe you have to develop some lightweight version of your.
Yeah. But in fact, the main contribution of the work is to introduce the new ideas, the new approach for addressing that open question, and how to realize that is a totally different context. In fact, it's as I mentioned in the list of open questions. So that is in fact one of the most desirable open question that we left open.
Thank you. And the next question comes from Ibrahim. Ibrahim, please.
I was going to ask somewhat similar question. Have you applied it in any real applications?
Oh, no. So sorry. In fact, for the works of MPS, so we have just opened we have just published at Crypto a few months ago, and in fact we are trying to design a practically usable system, and just we view the crypto publication as the theoretical foundation for the work, and we hope that the community also be interested in Z primitive, and we try to make a practically usable application.
So if I have students interested in applying your protocol, will you be interested to collaborate?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Okay.
So thank you. Yes. So
because I think students in that case would need numerical example of your scheme. Like if you just provide the paper, I don't think they will be able to understand. You have to give a numerical example, like we do for say El Gamal or Paylor or RSA. You need to give all the numbers.
Yeah.
Is it possible for
you? If we come up with some system that may be practically realizable based on the current cryptographic technique, then in that case we will think about implementation, and in that case we will have the numbers. However, so far we haven't come up with any concrete construction that could be that could achieve both efficiency and security. So
no, I'm not asking about that efficiency or whatever things, but you have a numerical example, right, to work it out step by step how it works.
So we have algorithms, but that is just that is just the general template for the generic construction. So I give the general template of how to achieve this primitive and how to achieve security in the strongest sense. However, when we talk about practice and about the numbers, about which primitive to choose, which signature scheme to choose, which proof to choose, which encryption scheme to choose. So in that case, so we have to go to the very detail, and we haven't come to that step.
Okay,
so
thanks.
I think probably it's a great chance to basically make it more specific, for people to make it more specific and applicable to specific applications domain. And here you can provide a very good starting point, so theoretical foundations and templates for further development.
Yes, that's essentially what we achieved so far and what we left open. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I think if we want to implement, so implementation is still left open, I guess, because you haven't.
Yeah, in fact the scheme that we propose at European Crypto is just for it's a proof of feasibility. We haven't provided even the parameters, and we just evaluate everything in the asymptotic sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so any last question before we close the talk from the audience? So I guess that's it, and we ended up very on time. So thanks a lot again for very interesting talk and sharing with us the latest talk at Crypto and Eurocrypt. I think, a lot of chance for us to collaborate and follow up with Khoa's team
Okay.
to work more on this exciting topic. So thanks, Khoa, and thanks for everyone for coming.
Thank you,
And see you-
everyone, and
see you
look
guys in
forward to collaborate with you.
Thank you, Khoa. Thanks,
And
everyone. See you guys in the next seminar.